glad y'all tuned in. We about to get the show started. Yeah. Dr. Clyde Winners and Yoshi. Yeah. In and now. We talking about back in the day and right now. Yeah.
Now let's introduce Yoshima the Genius and Dr. Clyde Winters, the godfather of research.
What up, though? What up, though? What up, though? How's the family doing out there? Tonight is another good night, a night to talk about something that relates to then and now. The damn computer is shaking. It is shaking. It is shaking because it's so exciting. Yes. Often we forget about the fact is that Black people in America, foundational Black Americans, we have a unique history. And our unique history is because of the fact that we went through an ethnogenesis. And tonight, that's what I plan to talk about. I want to talk about how we went through this ethnogenesis and became foundational Black Americans. Much of this is discussed in my book, The Nationality and Law of Foundational Black Americans, and some of my other books. But tonight we're going to kind of discuss this. We're going to kind of try to discuss how we went through this process of an ethnogenesis. Yes, this ethnogenesis is very, very interesting because the fact is that when you think about an ethnogenesis, you think about the reality of people living together, people changing, people becoming a whole different group. Yes, that's what happened to us. How you doing, Tom's 5? Torin Rod Samadaway, what up, though? Everything's fine with me. But again, in a sense, is that this ethnogenesis is something that must be discussed because originally we began as Black people. We began as Black people here in the United States. And then we met with other Black people, and we went through this process of ethnogenesis. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about this ethnogenesis that took place that led to us becoming, who we are today. And this is very important and something that we really, can really have an important understanding of, So let's kind of check this out. Ethnogenesis refers to the process through which a distinct ethnic group is formed, typically involving the development or emergence of a shared identity, culture, language, history, and sense of belonging among a group of people. This process is influenced by a variety of factors, including historical events, social interactions, cultural practices, and environmental conditions. Ethnogenesis can occur over long periods or rapidly under certain conditions. There's a number of key aspects that relate to this whole idea of ethnogenesis. One is cultural syncretism. Ethnogenesis often involves the blending of cultural traits from the different groups to create a new unified identity. This process is common in situations where diverse groups interact, such as through trade, migration, conquest, or colonization. Another aspect of ethnogenesis is a shared history and mythos. A common historical narrative or set of myths often plays a significant role in forging a sense of ethnic identity. These stories provide a foundation for group cohesion and a sense of belonging. Yes, this is what we find, I remember growing up and my mom would talk about our Aboriginal heritage. And back in the day, I would listen, but I didn't think about it too much. And the reason I didn't think about it too much was because the fact, in a sense, is that, I felt the Indians were always losing. And I looked at TV. We had a lot of cowboy movies on back in the day. And these cowboy movies made it clear that the Indians, in a sense, were a group that, They had strong identity. They created a very beautiful culture. But at the same time, whenever they were confronted by the cowboys and the cavalry, the Indians lost. So of course, I wouldn't, in a sense, really think of this whole idea. But again, I still, in a sense, understood the history. I understood the discussions in the home. Also, another aspect of ethnogenesis is a shared language or dialect. And this shared language or dialect is frequently central to the development of an ethnic group, as it facilitates communication and reinforces a collective identity. Many of you say, Dr. Winters, how can you say that there's a shared language when Black people in the Americas speak the English language? That's true. We do speak the English language, but over time, we've created various other languages that only related to our group, such as the Tut language. And even in terms of, 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 of the English language that we speak, they call the language that we speak Ebonics. Ebonics mean ebony sounds. And this comes from the fact, in a sense, that many of the words and the grammar that is, in a sense, unique to foundational Black Americans shows that we do have, in a sense, a separate language. And we have this separate language. We have this different English because of the fact that we went through this ethnic genesis. And because we went through this ethnic genesis, we began, in a sense, to have our own way of being, our own sense of being. And we also recognize the differences in terms of who and what we are. And this is very important in terms of understanding, this whole idea of ethnogenesis. There's key types of ethnogenesis when we think about it. There's primary ethnogenesis, and primary ethnogenesis is the idea that refers to the emergence of entirely new ethnic groups from previously unorganized or loosely affiliated populations. Then there's secondary ethnogenesis. Secondary ethnogenesis involves the reformation or transformation of an existing ethnic group, often in response to significant social or political changes. Yes, this happened to us because of the fact that we were, in a sense, we came from various Aboriginal cultures. These Aboriginal cultures not only interacted, in a sense, with those Black Irish and Sub-Saharan Africans that brought over here, but we also interacted with the whites. And because we interacted with Caucasians, we went through, in a sense, this ethnogenesis, how we were transformed into who we are today. Ethnogenesis highlights the dynamic nature of ethnic identities, showing that they are not fixed or innate, but rather shaped by historical, social, and cultural processes. Understanding ethnogenesis can provide insights into the origin of ethnic groups such as foundational Black Americans, the interplay between identity and power, and the impact of migration, colonization, and globalization on cultural development. The best example of ethnogenesis is the role of Blacks in ancient Europe. The first Eurasians were Black. The Eurasians were Khoisan. You can look at these pictures up in the front, up at the top, and you can see, in a sense, the Grimaldi. The Grimaldi is one of the earliest cultures that left art for us in English, over in Europe. And if you look at this, Grimaldi figure, you see that it relates to this Bushman woman who's standing right next to it. In the middle, in a sense, we see the first European, the first British, the first person in British. Through genetics and reconstruction, we know that the first were Black, and then we see Cro-Magnon man. Yes, yes, yes. At the end, to the far right, we see Cro-Magnon man. And Cro-Magnon man is clearly a Negroid person, or what we would call, in a sense, the African type. The first Europeans were Black. The Eurasians were Khoisan. Yes, the Khoisan people that we find in southern Africa today. These original Eurasians carried African genes. The Maat child carried haplogroup U and R1. These are African haplogroups. The first Europeans, like the Paleo-Americans, were dark-skinned. The ancient DNA of the first Europeans comes from the Ust-Ishtian skeletons from Siberia. Ust-Ishtian man also carried the male Y chromosome R1. The archaeological and craniometric measurements show that the first Europeans were Africans, namely Bushmen of Khoisan. There have been numerous Negroid skeletons found in Europe. Marceline Bourlet and Henri Vallas in Fossil Man provides an entire chapter on the Africans or Negroes of Europe. Anti-Diop, yes, Anti-Diop, also discussed the Negroes of Europe in his book, Civilization or Barbarism. Get that book. It's a very important book. And this book was written by Sheikh Anti-Diop. And it's a book in a sense that breaks down the organization, anthropology, and culture of the Black people in Africa. Marcel Bourlet and Henri Vallas in Fossil Man provides an entire chapter on the Africans, Negroes of Europe. Anti-Diop also discussed the Negroes of Europe and civilization of barbarism. Also, W.B. Du Bois discussed the Negroes in his book, The World in Africa, pages 86 to 89. Check these books out if you want to find out more about this. Du Bois noted that, and I quote, "There was once an uninterrupted belt, yes, an uninterrupted belt of Negro culture from Central Europe to South Africa." Would you believe that? Do you understand what this means? This means that Black people had a joint culture all the way from the Sahara in the north all the way down to South Africa. And much of this culture, in a sense, shared many elements. Yes. The Aurignacian civilization was founded by the Cro-Magnon people who originated in Africa. Cro-Magnon is the names of one of the earliest groups that they believe that settled, in a sense, in Europe. And they called these ancient Black people Cro-Magnon. They took this culture to Western Europe across the Straits of Gibraltar. The Cro-Magnon people were probably Bushmen or Khoi. Bourlet and Voss in Fossil Men, Elements of Human Paleontology, noted that, and I quote, "We know now that South African tribes presents many striking similarities with the ethnography of our populations of the reindeer age of Europe. Not to speak of their stone implements, which we shall see later, exhibit great similarities. Perengue has told us that in certain burials on the South African coast associated with the Aurignacian or Solutrean type industries." Yes. Aurignacian and Solutrean, these are names of the types of stone tools that these people used. And we find, in a sense, that the same tools used by people, the Aurignacian and the Solutrean cultures, first originate not in Europe. No. It originated in Africa. And it was African people, Black people, who took this style of tool making from Africa into Europe. They add that in relation to Bushman art, and I quote, "This almost uninterrupted series leads us to regard the African continent as a center of important migrations, which at certain times may have played a great part in the stocking of Southern Europe." Yes. What this means, in a sense, is that the earliest, the most ancient Europeans were Black people like you, Black people like me. Here we can see some of these Black people. From the far left, going from left to right, we see a Grimaldi statue. Yes, this is a statue of what's called the Grimaldi culture of Europe. Then we can see a picture of a Khoisan woman. Yes. If you look at this Grimaldi statue and Khoisan woman, you can see that many of the features were the same. The bubbleless breast, the stomach, the protruding buttocks. You can see, in a sense, that Grimaldi was just an example of a Khoisan. Yes, a Khoisan. One of the earliest peoples that lived in Southern Africa. Then we see the first Europeans. In the going from left to right, we see the first one is from Britain. This is a statue. This is the reconstruction, rather, of the skeleton of the earliest inhabitants of the British Isles. Yes. And then right next to him, to the far left, we find, in a sense, a statue of Cro-Magnon man. This is a Romanian. Yes, this is an example of the earliest people that lived in Romania or Eastern Europe. But as you can see, from the British Isles to, in a sense, Eastern Europe, we find, in a sense, the same people. These people were Black people. And we believe that these people were related to those people who live in Southern Africa today that we call the Khoisan. Finally, we must not forget that the Grimaldi Negroid skeletons show how many points of resemblance with the Bushman skeletons. They bear no less a resemblance to that of fossil man discovered at Ansalar in mid-Sahara, whose characters led us to class him with the Hottentot Bushman group. Again, in a sense, we see this relationship between the Grimaldi people. This is a culture, one of the ancient cultures of Europe, and in a sense, the Khoisan people who lived in southern Africa. Here you can see some of the various sites. These are the Upper Paleolithic period, and you can look at these sites. You know, these Aurignacian sites, the Redian culture, and the Magdalenian culture. All of these cultures, in a sense, all of these sites throughout Europe and Northwest Africa, these, in a sense, sites relate to the various ancient Black people who took this culture from Africa across the Straits of Gibraltar. You can see it's not really that far, across the Straits of Gibraltar and spread throughout Europe. Yes, this culture spread throughout Europe, you see. And researchers have carefully outlined the exodus of anatomically modern humans out of Africa 60,000 years ago, and they're spread across Asia. It has been assumed that since anatomically modern humans spread from East Africa to the Andaman Islands, modern humans must have settled Europe during this expansion. Yes, that's true. But the recent research has put this exit out of Africa further back than 60,000 years ago. Much of the evidence now shows that the first Black people who began, in a sense, to migrate into Europe did not migrate into Europe 60,000 years ago. They migrated into Europe 130,000 years ago. Did you hear that? 130,000 years ago, we see the first exit of anatomically modern humans. When they talk about anatomically modern humans, they're talking about the fact is that an anatomically modern human are those humans who look like us. The bridge across in a sense, across the eye is not as prominent, whereas archaic humans have a strong bone bridge across in a sense their skull, and this in a sense shows their archaic nature. When they talk about anatomically modern humans, they're talking about people that don't have this large bony crown. The Aurignacian civilization, one of the oldest civilizations in Europe. It dates back to 46,000 years before the present. Yes, they left us beautiful art to show their culture. The earliest sites of Aurignacian culture are found in Spain. The radiocarbon dates for Bulgaria, i.e. the Karzanic cave, date back to 39.36 thousand years ago. Earlier researchers claimed that the artificial material found at the Bacho Kiro cave, dating to 46,000 years ago, was also Aurignacian. So you can see that these are some very old sites, you know. But the remains consist of a pair of fragmented human jawbones. The first Aurignacians in the Levant date back to 36.3 thousand years ago, and they were found at the Qasr Akil site in the Levant. And this dates back, as I said earlier, to 36,000 years ago. The oldest Aurignacian remains, on the other hand, they come from Iberia, Spain. They are even older than 36,000 years ago. Yes. The artifacts from the Abreda cave and the Abri Romani, located in Catalonia, Spain, these sites go back between 41,000 and 43,000 years ago. Yes, between 41,000 and 42,000 years ago. And as you can see, this shows that there has been a long interaction between these people, you see. And because of this interaction between these peoples, we're able, in a sense, to relate to this whole idea. And that's why it's very important that we look at this issue and remember, in a sense, exactly what's going on, because see, this is how we are able to judge, the relationships between these people. The dates for the Aurignacian in Europe again make it clear that these cultures were the same. Again, here we can see a Grimaldi statue and a Khoisan statue. Also, many of these people at this time, they shared the same haplogroups. The haplogroups are the DNA that people carry. We find, in a sense, that many of these people in Western Europe at this time, they carried the mtDNA haplogroups U6 and M1, which are in a sense common haplogroups among African people. And we find in a sense is that these genes began to enter this area, very early. They've got, as early as 32,000 years ago, R1 or V88. That's a very interesting Y chromosome. We find that as early as 7,000 BC, Europeans, in a sense, Black Europeans was carrying the R1 haplogroup. The radiocarbon dates for Bulgaria, the Khazarnika cave, date back to 39 to 36,000 years ago. Early researchers claim that the artifactual material found at the Bacho-Cairo cave dated to as early as 46,000 years ago. Again, this is complicated, and people have different ideas about this, you see. But we do know in a sense that these sites date between 36,000 and 41,000 BC. That's a long time ago. The first Aurignacians in the Levant date back to 36,000 years ago, and they're from Khoisan killed. Here you can see a Gravidian man, and this particular skull dates back to 28,000 years ago. And this Gravidian man, if you notice, let's look at this. Look at this skull. If you notice, right above the eyes, you can see in a sense structure. And this is what we try to, in a sense. We look at that bony structure. I don't know if you can see this. No, you can't see the arrow. But it's this bony structure right across the eyes that allow us to differentiate between archaic and what we could call anatomically modern Europeans. And as you can see, this area right above the eyes, across the forehead, is not in a sense very prominent. So we can assume that these are anatomically modern Africans because they lacked, in a sense, that really large bony structure. These dates for sites where anatomically modern humans were found in Western Europe make it possible for claims of U6, haplogroup U6, M1, etc., originating prior to 32,000 years ago. Many researchers believe that the Aurignacian culture in Europe from the Levant. Although this view has been accepted without challenge, the archaeological evidence, on the other hand, indicates that anatomically modern humans replaced Neanderthals during the Aurignacian period in Europe, and that is around 32,000 to 35,000 years ago. Before this, in a sense, the main inhabitants of Europe were the Neanderthal Black people. It is also evident that archaic humans were replaced in much of the Levant by the Levantine Aurignacian culture. And so we see, in a sense, this early expansion. The founders of this culture came from Africa. Some researchers argued that the Aurignacian culture was introduced to Europe. They based this conclusion on the fact that its toolkit was foreign to the Mousterian type. And look at here's one of these statues. Again, we find the sense that these statues, we think that these statues may have related to fertility. And the reason we think they relate to fertility is that we see that the women are represented with bulbous breasts, the stomachs protruding, and we can assume in a sense that they may have been relating to this whole idea of fertility, and women being very fertile, and because usually when a female is pregnant or she has children, her breasts, in a sense, they enlarge. And they enlarge because they're usually full of milk that the baby can be nourished with. But again, we do know that the Levantine and the Aurignacian populations did come from Africa. Numerous sub-Saharan skeletons have been found among the Aurignacians. Okay, we can look at this map. And if you look at this map, you can see that in the far north, you can see the ice age. You can see where the ice was. But we find, in a sense, that this very important culture called the Solutrean culture, this culture which originated in Southern Africa, Southern Africa. This is what makes it very important, is that this Solutrean culture that originated in Southern Africa was taken to North Africa, and from thence it was taken into the Americas, across the Atlantic into the Americas, and also into Europe. The interesting thing about the Solutrean culture, what makes it so outstanding, is that this culture, in a sense, have left many artifacts in the Americas and in Europe. It is the mainstream view of Spanish prehistorians that the Solutrean culture originated in Africa. Boulay and Valos noted that ancient tool kits found in South African burials along the coast are associated with the Solutrean industry. So then, therefore, in a sense, what do? You're saying, how do we do this? What we do is this. If archaeologists want to determine where a particular, art originated, or where a series of stone tools originated, what they do is they usually, in a sense, they date the sites where these tools or artifacts were found. And so then the oldest site where these tools or artifacts are found is usually assumed to be the site where, in a sense, this art form or this toolkit originated. Because the fact, in a sense, that the oldest Solutrean sites are in southern Africa, we have to assume that the Solutrean culture, which was later taken to Spain and later into the Americas, had to have come from Africa, since that's where the oldest tools have been found. These are some of the Solutrean tools, and they relate to the Assyrian culture, and many of them have been found in Algeria and southern Africa and in Europe, and again even in the Americas. Yes. Many of these type tools have been found in the Americas, in North America, and these tools in a sense relate to the idea that Africans had early migrated. There was an ethnogenesis in terms of Africans early migrating to North America and mixing with other people, because there was already people. The Solutrean tools, they appear, around 50,000 years ago. So we can assume, in a sense, that it had already been Black people over here before that. But we know, in a sense, that Black people, we can't really say that Black people originated in the Americas, mainly because of the fact that we had the Ice Age. And the Ice Age, in a sense, the Ice Age did not, in a sense, allow people to migrate into Europe, into North America from Asia until around 10,000 BC. But these Solutrean sites go back 20, 30, 50,000 years ago. See, these are Aurignacian and these Solutrean sites. So what this means that the people who made these tools had to come from someplace. They couldn't have walked into North America from Asia. So researchers believe they had to have come from Africa. And this is where the earliest evidence of the tools was. So this would be absolutely true. Gordon Child claimed that the North African Spanish population used Solutrean tools were in direct communication. You see, these are some of the sites where we find various Solutrean tools in Europe. So as you can, in Spain. So as you can see, these tools were used extensively in Spain. And and we know, in a sense, again, as I said earlier, these tools originated in southern Africa. Geneticists used DNA to explain the origin of Neolithic Europe. They claim that this population was mainly Indo-European speakers, which is false. But, and it's false because of the fact that Anatolian people who settled Neolithic Europe were Kushites from the Nile Valley. Yes. They want to teach you that the ancient people who led, in a sense, to many of the farming cultures and the cattle rearing cultures were Indo-European, but this is false, because we know, in a sense, that this cattle herding tradition, the pottery styles, the art styles, all of these styles first appear in Africa. So we know, in a sense, that this art style and this culture had to have appeared in Africa first, not Europe. You see, geneticists use DNA to explain the origin of Neolithic Europe. They claim that this population is Indo-European speakers, but this is false. If you buy my book, I have a book called Manufactured Genetic Origins, the Fake Eurasian Back Migration. In this book, I discuss the fact, in a sense, is that this is all wrong. The research finds in this book reveal that the agro-pastoral people who founded civilization in Europe were Kushites from the Nile Valley. The manufactured genetic origins make it clear that, one, the Anatolian and steppe agro-pastoralists were not Indo-European speakers. And two, Eurasians and Africans have been mixing and in contact for thousands of years, up to and after the Atlantic slave trade. Yes. That's why, if you really want to learn about the origins of people in Europe and their genetic basis and how they, how they, in a sense, were not Indo-Europeans, get my book, Manufactured Genetic Origins, the Fake Eurasian Back Migration. Wright wrote that the ancestors of East Asian, Europeans, West Africans, and Australians were until recently almost completely isolated from one another for 40,000 years or longer. This is what the Europeans teach. But this is false. This is false. This is false. We know it's false because all you had to do is just look at the skeletons from Grimaldi. The Grimaldi skeletons, in a sense, show in a sense that there were black people already in Europe. See, that shows in a sense that black people in Europe and black people in Africa were not isolated because they used the same tools. The interaction between Eurasian blacks and Africans, they're forever. Makes it impossible for geneticists to claim that there were three distinct continental populations. And these are three distinct genetic populations. They claim that there was Asians in Europe, there was Caucasians in Western Europe, and there were black people in Africa. And these people were separated. We know this is all wrong. It was black people everywhere, black people on every continent, black people in every area that existed on the planet Earth. But they want to teach you, in a sense, a lie. That's why I come to you to teach you the truth. It is false because blacks or sub-Saharan Africans have always inhabited Eurasia and the Americas. So there's no such thing as continental specific genomes or haplogroups. In other words, there's no group of genes that are specific to people who live in Asia, Europe, or Africa. No, all of these genes go back to African people because it was the African people who spread these genes. And this is something that we have to, in a sense, understand, that we've been taught a lie. Lewis Krauss says, Reich argues that the aDNA revolution, quote, allows geneticists with greater detail and certainty to study human history, evolution, and identity than previous historical methods like archaeology or history. These researchers believe that archaic bones supplies a genome that, after analysis via expansive sequences and Bayesian statistics, show the origin of people. Yes, they do, but the only problem is that all the genes came from Africa. And the earliest evidence of these genes always goes back to Africa. Therefore, when they're trying to tell you, in a sense, that this group or that group carries a specific set of genes, they're lying. You got to get my book, The Manufactured Genetic Origins, The Fake Eurasian Back Migration. You can understand how black people came into Europe, you see, and how, in a sense, they're using so-called Bayesian statistics, not in a sense physical evidence, but they're using statistics. Those are just numbers to claim that this or that group of people lived here, or this or that group of people lived there. No, the hard evidence, the archaeological evidence, the craniometric evidence, that's the skulls, bones, and things like that, the skeletal evidence, all of this points to the earliest people in Europe being black, like you, black, like me, black, like us. The archaeological evidence does make it clear that there were two migrations into Western Eurasia by Africans. The first migration of Eurasians from Africa was by foragers carrying R1b1 and R1b1a, who first settled Iberia and Italy and migrated eastward with millet. The second migration of Africans came from the east. These Africans were Kushites, who first settled in Anatolia and spread eastward into India with millet and into the steppe region, and from there westward into Iberia and eventually Britain. Yes. There were two migrations, one across the Gibraltar, and another one that came, in a sense, from the Caucasus Mountains. The Kushites from Africa that settled Eurasia were Niger, Congo, and Nilotic speakers. They carried, in a sense, R1b1, Y haplogroup, and R1b1a, and also R1m269. Yes. These are the people, they also, in a sense, when they went into these areas, they had first developed the bell beaker, corded ware cultures, and the wavy line and dotted pattern pottery was first, in a sense, perfected in Africa, and they took this along with their genes into Europe. Yes. This is all, in a sense, what you have to understand. And the best way to understand the migration, the origin of these people, you have to get my book, Manufactured Genetic Origins, The Fake Eurasian Back Migration. The failure of geneticists to use archaeological data made their guesses about Indo-European prehistory wrong. You know, they say in a sense that the first people of Europe were Indo-Europeans. No, they're wrong. They are wrong because geneticists had no way to corroborate their findings with hard physical evidence. No, there are no ancient skeletons. I already showed you the pictures of the ancient skeletons. The ancient skeletons are black people like you, black people like me, black people like us. No, there were no white people in Europe in ancient times. The ethnogenesis was between Africans and later Africans and Europeans. Yes. You see, you know, if you want to see these slides, join my Patreon. They're going to be, the slides are going to be in my Patreon. Here's some articles that relate to this expansion of black people in Europe. Go to join my Patreon so you can download this list of articles, or just just stop the video, and after you stop the videos, copy this page, and then you can have these references that can help you to do further research in terms of the ethnogenesis of Africans in Europe. I'm going to maybe let this stay up for about 30 seconds so you can maybe copy it, and go and check these articles out. Learn how to be a researcher. It's very important that you do this. Okay, again, I really hope that you've learned something today. How you doing, Nadi, Don, Fatal Joy, John, Tones 5? Thank you guys for coming, and thank you for showing up, and thank you for joining me for this night. And I hope that you've learned a little bit more, and that you can see the important role of these various groups of people who went through an ethnogenesis. And an ethnogenesis is when people mix and then they form other populations. And so we have to say ethnogenesis. So we can't just say, we just can't say that all the Europeans, and we can't just say that they're Africans. If they have other archaeological names, we give them that credit. Over in America, there was an ethnogenesis, and I'll talk about that on another show. But right now, in a sense, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you'll, right now, like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe to this video. And please, in a sense, share this video with other people so that they too, in a sense, will be able to understand the expansion and the role of black people in Europe. Thank you for joining me tonight for Then and Now. Have a good evening.
Yeah. Right now, it's time to wrap everything up, you dig? Yeah. I hope y'all enjoyed the show. Yo. And Dr. Clyde Winters, Then and Now. Yeah, I really appreciate everybody, all y'all support. Y'all like, subscribe, and share this. You dig it? Yo, you've been invited to the Then and Now. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed the Then and Now. Yeah, Dr. Clyde Winters in the Yoshima. Intro, outro to the Then and Now. We gon' see it, so have Then and Now. Yeah, raise your head, why put them down? B1 on that Then and Now. FB8 on that Then and Now. FBB on that Then and Now. It's all about unity on that Then and Now. My indigenous folks on that Then and Now. All my Africans rise on that Then and Now. Rise up on that Then and Now. And don't forget to subscribe to Then and Now.
The only thing that can save you is B1, B1, B1.